what's important is the role of millennials and Gen Z coming into these elections because we're the majority, or we're starting to become the majority, especially in these countries that
Very
that
true.
I've mentioned. And it's important that we see how things have changed and what influences we've been able to have on the elections.
Greetings and welcome to BTY. My name is Michael, and for the first time in too long, I'm joined by my good friend Daniel Hammond, and we are here to talk about the fact that in this year alone, 2024, there are over 70 elections that are happening, and we want to talk about the role that our generation, the younger generation, actually has to play within all these elections. Some of the major changes that we've been seeing taking place in our own countries, like South Africa and Namibia, that have hosted their own elections. South Africa's elections already taken place, and Namibia's to happen very soon. So Dan, there's a lot to jump into here, man. Conversation more on the political side. I just wanted to find out how you've been doing first of all, and what your take is on what's happening around the globe at the moment.
Yeah, so no, it's good to be back, Mike. And yeah, it's been quite a busy time, with the end of year fatigue that's kicking in and the roundups that's happening at work. There's a lot to do with a little energy. So yeah, it's been
And
it's been a bit of a difficult one the last little while, just in terms of all that I need to do, even finishing up my studies, my thesis. I'm still busy with that. And yeah, just happy that I can see the end of this year coming slowly but surely from my perspective, but very keen to just get into the holidays and take the much needed
not
rest.
too far away.
But yeah, so just before we hop in, how have you been on your side? I know it's been both of our birthdays, even with yours just happening earlier this week and mine happening a few days earlier than that, but otherwise we can hop in after that.
Yes, yes, true, Gamera. Flip. Another cool thing about our friendship is the fact that we are born so close together. So yeah, Flip. It was my birthday just a few days ago, and yeah, at the end of the day, you're just getting older, man. I think the glamour of birthdays kind of, we were speaking about this earlier, man. It gets taken away as you get older because you actually don't look forward to getting older as much. 21 kind of sounds
Yeah.
better than 22. Although we're still very young, man. So I think it's only
Mm.
going to become even more like that as we go on. But
Yeah.
no, overall, I can't complain, man. Very blessed to be able to say that I've gotten older and been able to celebrate another birthday with family and friends. So enjoyed it, brother. Only wish we could have been together on our birthdays, but we'll be meeting up soon.
Yeah. Sure thing. Yeah, no, it's one of those that we haven't had in many years where we were able to celebrate our birthdays in one location, but we're always sending each other good messages and that's heartwarming, man. But jumping into today's topic of how important like the political landscape and how in focus it was this year has been, yeah, it's been quite interesting, like with what's been happening. I know
Yes.
Russia had elections, India as well, but what's been quite like captivating has been the South African elections, with it starting GNU for the first time in its history, as well as now that Donald Trump that's just won again after losing
Definitely,
in the
man.
previous elections, and Botswana that's gotten a new party that's going to be leading the country forward after 6 decades with. And then yeah, what's going to be interesting is also the build up to Namibian elections, which is going to be happening later this month. So there's a lot to talk about, man. And what's important is the role of millennials and Gen Z coming into these elections because we're the majority, or we're starting to become the majority, especially in these countries
Very
that
true.
I've mentioned. And it's important that we see how things have changed and what influences we've been able to have on the elections. So getting a bit into the South African elections, we know that the ANC that was running for such a long time lost the majority, and that's because the younger generation isn't looking at just what happened in the past and the liberation that happened with the ANC, but we're starting to look at the performance and what's going to take the country forward and into the next few decades, going from this year.
No, it's so true, brother. I mean, politics is something that I sort of get sucked into, and then for a while I won't be as involved and interested, and then recently I've definitely got sucked back in, with all of these things that have been happening, man. But
Yeah,
look, in my home country of South Africa, I think we've seen something that we've been calling for a long time. At least most of the people that I spoke to, were looking for some kind of change in that, as you mentioned, the performance that we were seeing from our party
yeah,
in power, the ANC, you had the
mm,
majority around the country my whole life. Um, they just weren't performing. And I think that's been the case since even a guy like Zuma was actually the
yeah,
president, there's been people calling for change since then, and even maybe since before then. I wouldn't have
mm,
remembered it, but yeah. So it was definitely change that was a long time coming, and finally this year we saw it. And
yeah,
uh, it's quite amazing to actually be in that post election state now, where we're actually seeing a lot of good things happening. I mean, just being a South African living in the country, what I've noticed is the economy has definitely somewhat improved since the GNU came into power. I've seen quite a few different positive things being put into place. So as a whole, we're actually starting to see some benefits of the change that we were calling for so long, and
yeah,
and I think that that is only quite like vindicating and quite a good thing for a lot of South African voters to actually see,
yeah,
that they're what they were calling for and what was voted in at the end of the day. The ANC losing their majority and having to work with these different parties. I think some of us were a little bit cautious that this might just be end up going from bad to worse, but
yeah,
thankfully we actually are seeing a bit of a reprieve and things are starting to get better. Now, another interesting thing that you mentioned there, man, was Botswana. And I obviously I don't
yeah,
live there, so I wouldn't know their situation too well. But that's another country, just another example of a country that, like you say, man, there's the party that initially, like, kind of, they came into independence under. Um, but for the first time now, that party is being overthrown in both South Africa and or,
mm,
outvoted, I guess, in South Africa and in Botswana. So I wonder, like you say, if there's just been a shift in terms of
yeah,
the millennials and the Gen Zs now coming into the majority. I think that definitely plays a role. I mean, this was the first national election that I was able to vote in, and that would have been a lot of people my age. It would have been the same
yeah,
thing for them. So yeah, but I think that that's a progression for both of those countries. And
yeah,
the unfortunate thing is, there's still many countries in Africa that could do with something like that, man. A government in place that is held accountable for their performance, rather than just the fact that they were the party that they came into power during the independence.
mm,
I mean, just one example of that would be like Zimbabwe, man. Who really need a good government at the moment. So I'm really happy for my country and for another country like Botswana, to see this change coming in. But what do you think it'll take for more African countries to actually see this kind of thing? And
yeah.
what do you think the difference was in South Africa and Botswana compared to those other countries?
Yeah, so I would say it takes a thing called political maturity, and this is where democracy plays a more important role because if you have been following the Botswana elections and how that transition took place, it was very, very stable, and the president was able to say, okay, I see that my party is losing its majority and that it's called the Umbrella for Democratic Change, the UDC party that's just currently taken over in Botswana. He was able to say like congratulations to the new president Duma Boko
Okay.
and hand over this country to another party, and that comes with a lot of maturity. He could have manipulated things to
Mm,
go another way, and that's when people or leaders per se look at what's best for
mm,
the country and care for their people rather than just care for themselves. And that's something that's needed, and it comes with a changed perspective from leaders and the
sure,
way
sure.
leaders are cultivated. Because when these African countries do bad, it is because the leaders or that elite group is looking to take care of themselves and make sure that they are sorted by the time that they go out of power. But we need
Yeah.
to start getting to a place where we are getting into those positions for change and for the people to make the country a better place and not just make ourselves better. And that's the heart that things should flow out of.
So true, man.
And I'm not sure what's going to happen in Namibia. It's interesting. There's a lot of talks. Political analysts are saying that there could be a change. There could be something similar to the GNU, but then others are saying that Swapa might just have the majority again. But if we look at the previous elections with presidential candidates, the opposition, the guy that was next in line compared to Hage Geingob, he got 30%. So that was a lot more of a percentage than what happened in 2014, the previous elections. So we can see that slowly but surely, SWAPO is starting to lose its majority.
Mm,
So even if it might not happen this elections, it surely is going to happen in the next. So
sure.
that's trends that we should be following. But to make the change, you need to give go and give your say and not just talk about it but actually take that action. And then another interesting one is the USA elections with Donald Trump winning. So I was actually rooting for the Republicans to win because they are more on the conservative side. What is your stance on that, man?
Yeah, the USA elections, I must say, when when Donald Trump first came into power in 2016, was when I sort of first like got introduced to politics. It was such a publicized event, it was the biggest news around the world everywhere. When that happened in
Yeah,
2016, and yeah, that kind of sucked me in, and I think the same thing has happened now. In that this has been a
yeah,
huge, huge event. Everyone is speaking about it, and what's funny is that like leading up to it, this is something that I wanted to mention, man.
yeah,
There's this like silent majority of people that are actually um,
mm,
voting for guys like Donald Trump. And here in South Africa, we had it with our party as well. Here in the Western Cape. But most people you speak to who are like in the public eye, so in America, what they do with their media is they try and
mm,
make it look like everyone is anti Donald Trump. They try and turn the whole narrative
yeah,
against him. And if you like Donald Trump, and if you have Republican and conservative values, you
mm,
are twisted and old, and you are anti human rights and all of these things. But what's interesting is that the majority of people, like Donald Trump, even won the popular
yeah,
vote in the USA, which means he got more votes. Like it wasn't just electoral votes, but it was actually he got more votes from the general people as well. So it's just funny to see that the people there's actually a silent majority of people that wanted to get him in, but the vocal people were actually the minority, although they were trying to make it look like they were the majority. So that's been something that's interesting to see play out. Yeah, and it's interesting to see now.
majority.
There's a bit of a meltdown happening from many people in the US media. And I think a big part of
Yeah.
that is legacy media, man. I don't know if you know exactly if you've heard of that term before, man, but it's basically refers to channels like
Mm,
CNN, like and MSNBC. These are American news channels, which have always played a huge role in general public opinion. I wanted to find out, like, uh, from what you have seen, what's been the role of the new
Yeah.
media, and like, what would you define that new media as? You know, is it just what we're doing here? But like, yeah, what do you think that role played in the American elections?
Yeah, man. So I would say that it's been a big win for independent journalists. So these are guys that have their own podcasts on YouTube, that's got their own YouTube channels, where they are giving their real take on what's actually happening on the ground. So there's this guy that I was following. I'm not familiar with his name now, but we could probably put in a link of what he's been doing. But he was big on Trump, but not just
Mm,
Trump for what was happening, but because of what was being pushed out there, and him just trying to give an authentic view of like what he personally actually experienced, opposed to what CNN was saying. I know Fox News was a bit more accurate if you look at them also giving out the result of the elections quite like faster compared to CNN
yeah,
and the other news medias. But what we see that's often the case is that 90% of the media houses in America belongs to the Democrats, and that could be the same
exactly that.
with South Africa, where there's also a certain group that the media belongs to. So they can tell these journalists that they hire to give a certain narrative, and it might not always be the most accurate. And that's just been evident with the American elections, where a certain narrative was being pushed to the rest of the world, and even in Europe, where people were
Mm,
really anti-Trump. But when the election results came out, we saw that Trump won, and that it wasn't just a small victory, but it was quite big, because they've even got the majority within the
yeah,
USA, the House. But what's important is the fact that with YouTube coming up and with podcasts becoming such a big thing, especially with our age group, with the Gen Zs and the millennials, where we aren't just going to go and watch TV and the news like our parents did. We are more prone to watching YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. And that's where
so true, man.
we actually
Yeah,
get our news from, and the different perspective that
yeah,
comes with this. And it's important to note that there's still a lot of like persuasion that's happening within the medias, and also a lot of propaganda to turn the narrative in a certain way so that the outcome can be influenced in that sense. But this wasn't able to happen in America this time around, because the independent journalists, like I like to call them, was actually able to give a loud and clear message that was able to give the voters a real sense of who they should be voting for and why they should be voting in this way. And that's my feel around the role that the Gen
mm.
Z and the millennials have been playing in these elections that's been occurring like in 2024. What would you say is something that you could also take note that might be like a real factor in why things turned out the way they did, man?
Sure. Actually, there's an interesting point that I wanted to bring up, man. Let me know what you think on this, but I think it's another part of it is to do, and again, I think this
Yeah,
applies to America, but it even applies to South Africa, and our situation is that it's very dangerous to silence
yeah,
one group of people. So as you mentioned there, man, or even yeah, a group of people, I guess, that are united by a certain, belief system. So that meaning, like, in America, what was happening is that, as you mentioned, all the biggest media houses are owned by the Democrats. So it's almost like the Republicans have just been getting silenced for a long time now, and even in
mm,
disregarding just the media houses, let's say. again, what I mentioned,
Yeah.
it's almost like you get demonized in public just for having a Republican or conservative opinion, and saying that you like Donald Trump, for example, that can get you in quite a bit of trouble, in certain places. So when you silence a
Mm.
group like that, initially it'll
Yeah.
work, but in the long term, it can
Mm.
have some ramifications. And I think that's what we've seen play out now is that people are tired of being silenced. They're tired of having not having their voice heard, and also um, not like being made to feel bad for having their certain belief. You know what I mean? And so they're actually fighting back against that.
Yeah.
So I think for one term or maybe two terms it can
Mm.
work, but eventually people will retaliate, and I think that's what we saw happen in America. A lot of people have retaliated by going out and voting for the other party that they believe will actually let their voice be heard. And there's a lot of people voted for him
Yes.
for other reasons, as well. In that,
Mm.
for from an economic perspective, he's a lot stronger. And even when it comes to negotiating with other powerful countries like Russia and China, man, I think a lot of people are more confident having a guy like Donald Trump there than having Kamala
Yes.
Harris there, who really couldn't really stand too much scrutiny. In interviews, she wasn't able to handle herself
Yeah.
in the best way. So yeah, one interesting thing that I've seen is that now the Democrats are saying, well, it was their mistake for sort of choosing her as the candidate.
Mm.
She was maybe a bit of a weak candidate to put forward. Um, but look, I think now they're obviously going to go and have to do some reflection.
Mm.
And we'll see what happens. Yeah, when the next elections come. But what I want to say, man, is that I think that also comes true in South Africa, and that I think a lot of people, um, yeah, would have felt the same way here in South Africa, in that there was one narrative that was being pushed, and again, that silent majority actually decided to fight back this time. So I think that definitely played a big role, and it's exciting to see, man. It's exciting to see change in our country.
Yeah.
Obviously, for the positive, you don't want to just see change for the sake of it, but I think that we're actually seeing positive change, and I think America might be seeing the same. Um, Sure, it's been quite interesting as well. I don't know how much of attention you've been paying to like
Yeah.
what Elon Musk has been doing in that election. And even now, post election, he's actually become involved in the American Party.
Mm.
He's like part of running even like a section of government, which is the Department of Government Efficiency. I don't know if you've seen that, man.
Yeah, no, I've seen that it's also something that he mentioned before going into the elections, and it's something that he's actually taking action on now. So you can see these are guys that are like men of their word, like with
Yes,
Rogan also being in there, Dane, what's his name from the UFC. So these are like quite masculine guys
Dana White.
in an era where there's been a lot of like emasculation. And yes, these aren't perfect people. They're human beings. They've got their mistakes. There's a
Yeah,
lot of things that Trump hasn't done right in his life, and we can even look at things that Elon Musk also hasn't done like the right way,
sure.
but we have to look at what would be best for the country, and that's also a factor coming into
What are they
like
doing now?
the
Yeah,
Namibian elections. With SWAPO had their time and they've really done well, but there is things that can be done better. So the question is being asked, like, can these parties evolve to become
sure.
modern political parties where they change from being liberation movements to actually being like matured political parties? There's a lot of depth that you can go into with that if you are doing like a political
Mm,
analytical like analysis of it. But with us, just like the general outlook, even in Botswana, like what people were voting for was for better economical circumstances, and that hope came with the new party, especially with Botswana being tied or really being dependent on the diamond industry. But that's kind of taken a toll on them because the diamond industry has been going down with cheaper options coming in, like not like synthetic diamonds that's taken place in the markets. So people were looking for the change in the economical atmosphere within Botswana to look
Mm.
at different different sectors that can start playing a more significant role with the GDP in the country and contributing to their economical climate. So in Namibia, what we're also going to be voting for and what would be the right and the smart way would be looking at what's going to give us better economical circumstances, what's going to give us lower, like who's going to be able to give us lower if inflation rates, better living circumstances, because that's been the trend around the world. We want things to be a bit cheaper because we've been taking a toll financially as the globe. So we're looking at political stability and even world peace and order. And a guy like Donald Trump was saying that that's also going to be his focus to bring peace into the country again, where there's been so much unrest when it came to different power struggles and
Yes.
wars that's been happening, innocent lives that's been lost. And these are factors that drive who we are going to be voting for, not because we want to vote for our favorite party, but we actually have to look at parties that's going to bring a positive change to this world. And that's been, I think, the drive behind the elections in the many different countries this year, man.
Yeah, sure. One interesting thing that I heard not too long ago while listening to another podcast, man, with Elon Musk actually. But yeah, this is just something interesting that they spoke about, which is the fact that
Yeah.
it's actually worth looking at who the warmongers in our society, and there's always people who are who are actually warmongering and looking for things like war and are not really pro peace. Look at who those people are against, and that's sometimes quite often the person that
Yes.
you should actually be on their side. So as you're mentioning there, man, you guys are looking to get in people that are going to bring in peace, and yeah, same thing with America.
Mm.
You look at all the warmongers; they were actually quite pro Kamala
Mm.
just because that if she came into power, it was looking like things were not going to change when it comes to the wars that are currently going on. So that's an interesting thing again to consider when looking at
Yeah.
your party, your potential party, man.
Mm.
But yeah, sure. It's been a interesting year of 2024 so far when it comes to all of these
Yeah.
elections. I think we'll have to keep a keen eye on Namibia, and hopefully that'll be something that we can speak about not too long from now with some positive change coming in, man. I know that's something that you're looking for. And yeah, I mean, it's something that
Yeah.
a lot of young people, when I was there in Namibia, were saying that that's the
Mm.
thing that is needed. So yeah, I hope that that is what comes to pass. But we'll have to see in the next few weeks and days.
Yeah, no, we just pray that the right outcome will come and that God's will be done, as we Christians do say. But that's been a good conversation that we've been able to have tonight, man, and we appreciate it that you guys have been listening to, if you are still following with us. And yeah, make sure that you support our channel by liking and subscribing and sharing with your friends and your family. If you also feel that these are important points that need to be talked about, we at Better Than Yesterday look to becoming better in every aspect of our life. And this also then brings in politics. But thanks for being here with us tonight at BTY. Much love.
Signing out.